Hi guys, thanks so much for watching Speaking of Founders Mission. I'm Stephanie and today I'm here with Lisa Sterling, who is the founder and CEO of R3-engage. You clearly had an incredibly positive experience at Ceridian and made a huge impact. And now you're able to take all those things and give them to the clients that you're working with now. And so what are some of the common challenges that people come to you with that you can help them have that light bulb moment?
Yeah, well, it's funny. There are a number of CHROs that I have worked with and coached and mentored over the years who all have the same common challenge, which is they sit on an executive leadership team where they are not seen as a strategic partner. They don't feel they have the voice that needs to be utilized and recognized to drive change. And in many instances, their CEO talks a good game, but the behaviors don't align with where they're going. And so the question I get asked a lot of times is like, Lisa, how do we drive change when the person who's supposed to be leading it isn't the person to lead it? And the reality is that that's a hard question to answer. And there's lots of different potential solutions or things that you can do. But the reality is again, not all CEOs are created equal. And when you have one sitting there who truly doesn't believe that people are their most valuable asset, I always challenge them to, are you going to be able to push through that barrier and drive incremental change that might start to snowball into larger change? Or do you need to fundamentally find a different organization to go be a part of? Because let's be honest, you're not going to radically change a CEO's thought process or behaviors just because you're passionate about something. If I'd have gone to David and David had been a very different individual and said like, hey, look, let's go figure this out. Let's go do something radically different. Let's go blow this up and start from scratch. I would have left. I would not have been able to continuously be met with objection over objection over objection and rejection, and had any feeling of competence or, even my capabilities would be questioned, and I couldn't be there. Now, I'm not suggesting that every CHRO out there that has a challenge with their CEO go quit their jobs. That's not what I'm saying. But you do at some point have to make a decision. Is the fit there for you? Because if you do work for an organization who doesn't aspire to be that way right now, you got to hope that eventually the CEO is going to be replaced and their successor is somebody who's more aligned with you. Or you have to decide, is there a better place out there for you to fit? And I know that's challenging, especially in today's world, given the unemployment rates and everything that people are dealing with. But I also know, for me personally, I have to do what makes me feel like I'm making the greatest impact. And I had people that thought I was crazy when I said, hey, I'm leaving this job that I've had that's been incredible for 5 years during a pandemic, and deciding to go start my own business. Very similar to you. I mean, you've done the same thing. You've gone off and started a new venture in the midst of a pandemic where people aren't getting paychecks. Sometimes it is worth it to literally leap off the cliff without a parachute, and not know exactly where you're going to land. And I'm a big believer in being uncomfortable. It was something I used to tell my leadership team at Ceridian, which is, I want you to become comfortable with being uncomfortable, because I'm going to push you. I'm going to push you to take risk. I'm going to challenge you to imagine things that are really different. Because that's where you get change. That's where you get evolution. Doing the same things over and over and expecting different outcomes, well, we all know what that is.
How do you start to have the ability to think out of the box or become uncomfortable? Because sometimes, especially, if it's a leadership position and you've been working in that career and moving up over years or decades, I feel like you can kind of get stuck in the box.
Mm-hmm.
What are ways that you can even start to think outside the box again and figure out how to get uncomfortable?
Yeah, well, I think some of that comes down to one. I mean, you definitely have to have a strong sense of emotional intelligence and self-understanding of like what will be possible from who you are. Like you can't strive to become a person who is completely comfortable with risk if you are truly a risk adverse person. Like, you may be able to move the needle incrementally, but you're not going to become exponentially better and more comfortable with risk if you aren't a risk taker to begin with. What I would say is take that time and do the self-reflection, really start to understand like what are the key motivators and the key things that really help you. And then start to think about kind of some of the areas where you could possibly pivot. I mean, I think about this in terms of my career. I pivoted lots of times. And what I think happens in many instances is people start down a path on, truly, I'll say, a career path, and they can't ever deviate from the path that is in front of them. Because sometimes it's our own self-doubt. Well, gosh, I've spent, 10 years now, 15 years in this specific space or in this specific function. It's the only thing I know. Well, here's the reality, folks. Many of the behaviors that you have and many of the skill sets that you have gained can be redeployed in other areas and drive maybe even greater levels of success. I mean, I've embarked upon this new journey now, and I'm in an entirely different industry in this private equity space, of which I had experience because I worked for a privately held or a private equity backed organization. I knew how it all worked, but I took all the things I've learned and my passions and everything about me, and I've just redeployed it into something different. But we get in our own way. We get inside our own head, and it's like, well, no, I've only ever been in finance. I can't possibly go to HR because I don't know anything about HR. All I know is finance and spreadsheets. Or I've only been in HR. I don't know. There are so many things that can be utilized in other areas. We are just sometimes our own biggest challenge. We've got to get out of our own way. And if you're struggling with that, seek guidance, like from your leader, or go get a coach. Like, that's what I honestly spend most of my time doing in my coaching sessions with my clients, is helping them get out of their own way so they can even go experience more greatness. We're not good at telling our own story. We're not good at tooting our own horn. We're not good at saying, I am damn good at what I do. And when you're a woman, unfortunately, you're even a little bit more challenged with saying, you know what, I'm freaking awesome. And that's okay to say that. And I think that's where to start. Figure out what you're exceptionally good at and how you can go apply that in other areas. And then it doesn't seem so uncomfortable. It will feel more comfortable while you're moving and going to do new things.
Why do you think it is so hard for women to advocate for themselves and ask to be put in those positions and raise their hand? Why is that challenging?
Oh my God, how much time do you have? This is one of those questions that you want to be careful what you ask, because this could be a 3-hour long conversation. I think there's a lot of things. I do think it's a societal thing. I think, from the moment that young girls are brought into this world, as mothers, we nurture them to be girls. They now, again, I'm not suggesting that it's bad for your daughters to dress up in makeup. We were talking about this before. My daughter loves to put on dresses and heels and put makeup on, and she's 12, and I love it. But we a lot of times push them down a path. Like, little boys go outside, they get dirty, they crash their bikes, and little girls are inside playing with dolls. And this is evolving. I think it's definitely getting better from when my kids were first born to now. But I think that's part of it, is as a society, we've kind of set like how little boys grow up. Little boys aren't supposed to cry. That's showing a sign of weakness, and little girls are supposed to cry and show emotion. I say BS with all of that. I don't think there is a little girl should act this way or that way. And I think we need to start fostering a lot of that earlier on. We need to encourage girls to do things that don't necessarily align with the typical being a girl. We need to push girls in directions that maybe they weren't pushed in before. And we need to give them permission, which sounds silly, to stand up and to scream from the mountaintops about what they bring to the table and to have that confidence. But we need our male counterpoints to help with that. And I think that's where, as I've looked at some of the women movements that have happened, and even the women groups that I've been a part of, both within my own organization and others, many times, like any other employee resource group, we segment the groups to people who are like us. So if we have a women's network, that women's network is predominantly made up of women. So as women, we all sit around a table and we all talk about the things you and I are talking about. We need to be more confident. We need to be more outspoken. We need to have, not just a seat, but a voice at the table. We need more representation in the executive suite. We need more representation on boards. But we're talking amongst ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
The people who can help us make some of the greatest inroads there are our male counterpoints. and counterparts, but they're the ones that we don't bring in because, well, we need a women's group. It's the same when you get into, you know, the other employee resource groups. The best way to create an organization that's filled with belonging is to break down these silos and create collision points where people of different ethnicities and backgrounds and sexual orientations or whatever are coming together, talking freely and openly because it feels safe and they feel a sense of belonging. That's where you get true inclusion and diversity. And I think that none of that happens. And so as women, we tend to stand back. We tend to hold back until we're 100% confident. And I, you know, raising 3 daughters myself, I'm the first to tell my girls, I don't ever want to hear, well, oh, I cry like a girl. No, we don't know. That's not how we talk in our house. But it's going to take far more people focused on this and a far greater movement before I think women will finally find their footing and their voice in a way that is equal to or more so than our counterparts.
Where did your boldness come from? Your ability
My father. It's funny because my dad, bless his soul, he passed when I was 21, but I remember as a young kid, like I was the kid who came home. I ran my bike into a parked car. I would have scratches all down my arms. I may or may not have set a field on fire accidentally when I was playing with fireworks when I wasn't supposed to. You never found me inside the house. And my dad used to always push me. And he would say, listen, there is absolutely nothing that you cannot accomplish. It doesn't matter what you want to be, who you want to be, what you want to be like. Go after it. And I remember the first time I came to him and said, Dad, I think I want to be a lawyer. My dad was like, oh my God, you'd be awesome because you never shut up. They encouraged that. My parents encouraged me to use my voice. My mom is and still is a very strong woman who doesn't allow people to push her around. And so I had wonderful role models. And as I grew up, I surrounded myself with other strong women. My business partner now used to be one of my mentors. I worked for her early on in my career. And at the time I was like, damn, she pushes me. Like, this is hard. Like there were times where I was like, she's really tough on me. And I realized now why. And I'm so thankful that she was. And I think that's the thing is if you don't feel like you have that naturally, go find somebody who will do that for you. Because it's so super important. And it's so super important to tell our kids it's okay they don't have to feel bad about whatever it is they want. If they want to play Barbies, great. I'm not suggesting they shouldn't, but you know what? If my daughter's next door neighbor is a boy and he wants to come over and play Barbies, I sure as heck hope his parents are supportive of that.
It is fascinating because as you said before, we both have girls who are very into fancy things. So it's not uncommon at all to see my daughter in there wearing a Frozen dress with high heels, makeup, and then digging dinos.
Yep.
She said that right now she wants to be a paleontologist rock star, which is the first one I've ever heard of. So
that's awesome.
Pretty exciting, but I'm just like, do it. I don't want her to have limitations of what she thinks she can or can't do or feel like she shouldn't be doing things that are interesting to her. Because I feel like that's when you thrive.
Well, and oh my gosh, you totally hit the nail on the head. And that is, you know, I learned this early on in my career studying strengths and what makes people successful. And it is that it's not only respecting, but accentuating people's differences and, you know, embracing those. I have 3 daughters. My oldest is 22. My middle is going to be 15 this week. And my youngest is 12. And they could not be more different. Mm-hmm. And I remember after having my first one, I had a gap before my second one. And I remember as Kaylee, my middle daughter, was getting older, I would say things that went against everything I knew. But as a parent, it's what just flew out of my mouth, which is like, well, that's not how your sister does that. And why do you have to be like that? And studying the science and things behind what makes people tick and what their strengths are, I've learned, like, stop doing that, you know, accept all of the uniquenesses about people and know that, like, I have a very creative child. My youngest is incredibly creative. I don't understand it because I don't have a single creative bone in my body. My oldest is everything's black and white. She's very meticulous. I'm everything's pink and purple and gray and blue. And my middle daughter is she's very organized, very strategic, but she's going to probably be my engineer. Her brain works differently. And it's That's wonderful, because if you can find something that you are passionate about, good at, enjoy doing, and make a career out of it, you're going to be one of the happiest individuals who's thriving. And that's what I tell my kids is like, figure out a way to spend the rest of your life doing what you love and what you're exceptionally good at, and make a career out of it. It may not make, 6 figures a year or whatever, but the happiness and the well-being that you will experience will far outweigh what your W-2 or T4 looks like at the end of every year.
So hearing all of this, it's not surprising that one of your honors was Working Mother of the Year.
Yes.
It seems like you're doing a lot of great work, both at work and at home. How in the world does one become Working Mother of the Year?
Well, I mean, it's funny because when I won that, and I told my kids about it, they're like, and pardon my English, Mom, our house is a hot mess. Some days it's like a shit show in here. And I'm like, it is. And they're like, so how did you win this? And I'm like, because that's what people see of me. I don't have an Instagram perfect life. I don't try to demonstrate an Instagram perfect life. I don't aspire to have one. What I have done is I've come to realize that there's no such thing as work-life balance. It is all about integration. It is all about fluidity. I'm always going to let somebody down, whether that's my job or my children or my spouse. What I have figured out is how to minimize that as much as possible. But when I'm present, whether that's at work or whether that's at home. And I think that's one of the things, especially now during a pandemic, that we have got to become more focused on and more thoughtful about is, if you're at work, be at work. Even if that means at your kitchen table or your bedroom, your bed or your office or whatever, be at work. But when you're at home, be at home. Put down your phone. Don't be checking your laptop or your iPad or your email. And I'm not perfect at that still. Like last night at dinner, my phone buzzed and I had to pick it up, and my kids immediately, Mom, get off your phone. And I was like, I just have to look really quick. And then I put it back. I'm so not a perfect mom, but I think that's what working moms are. They're working moms. They're working at home. They're working at being a mom. They're working at being a wife. They're working at everything. And just because you work in the home doesn't mean you're not a working mom. And I think that's the other thing that, I am super, super grateful for, is my husband paused his career. It's been 4 or 5 years ago now. He was the president of a wonderful startup in Lincoln, Nebraska, where we were living. And he put his career on pause so that I could go do what I do best. And I couldn't do this without him. When I won that award, I was like, this should be the Working Dad Award, because if it wasn't for him, I couldn't do it. But I think that's the thing, is be okay with saying, like, my life is a hot mess. I have a blog, Mama Llama's World, that I blog on. I haven't done it lately. I need to get back to it. But if you read my blogs, you'll see, like, my house is chaos. But that's how most people's are. I don't try to be anything that we're not. And obviously that was well respected, and somebody found greatness in that. So
it seems like that's also a theme of your life, though, is being real, because it's so much about finding the real culture, finding the real inspiration behind what drives people, showing the real life so that others aren't comparing what they think is a perfect life to their life. What would you say that being real is something that's super important to you?
it is. And there is nothing that makes me more crazy than when I come together with somebody who isn't genuine and authentic and puts on a facade of who they are or what their life is. And, like, here's the reality. I don't care if you work. I don't care what kind of car you drive. I don't care what your house looks like. I don't care about any of that stuff. I care about who you are and how you show up every single day. And whether you're showing up where I work, or you're showing up in my home, or you're showing up in my child's life, just be yourself. And because that truly is the person who you can be the best version of. And for me, like, I don't want people to think that I'm something I'm not. And do I always say the right things? God, no. I've put my foot in my mouth so many times where I'm like, oh, I shouldn't have said that. I remember when David asked me to lead and be the chief people officer, I actually said to him, I'm like, oh my God, I'm like a walking HR violation. I always say the wrong thing. Like, I'm sure there are things that I say that somehow are offensive. And he's like, but you're genuine and you're authentic, and you will make this role something that is a true representation of who you are and who we want to be as a company. And we did. Like, the whole organization rallied around changing what the definition of people and culture were at our company. And we did it by being genuine, by being authentic, being real. And there were days where it looked really ugly and dirty and messy. But that's okay, because that's life.
So what, living that experience, and feels like you were your true self there, but you were also, obviously ready for some kind of a change.
Mm-hmm.
What triggered that interest in going from corporate life to starting your own company and helping all of these other people?
Yeah, so it was the middle of last year. I had started working on a new endeavor, still doing my role, but I had started working on a new endeavor at Ceridian that I was really passionate about. David was really behind it, and it was going to be to create like this what, for lack of a better term, like a culture academy, because a lot of my job at Ceridian, aside from being their chief people officer, was I spoke at conferences. I spoke all over the globe. Last year I was or earlier this year, I was in London speaking. I MC events. Like, I get out and I talk about what we do and our story. I wanted to do that on a broader basis, because I did spend a lot of time working with our sales team. I would get called in to talk to other CHROs about how the Ceridian platform Dayforce impacted our culture. They wanted to always know our story. How did you go from being known for the wrong reasons to where you are? And I thought, oh my gosh, I can go teach other companies how to do this.
Mm-hmm.
So fast forward to early this year, I had been battling some health issues last year, and finally was able, thank God, to have surgery before the pandemic kicked off. And I had 6 weeks of not being able to basically leave my house. And for anybody that knows me, and I'm sure the folks listening to this will tell, my energy level, I can't sit still. And so that period of time really let me think about what that would look like, and invested a lot more time in that. And David and I had a candid conversation about it. And, I thought there was great opportunity for me to go help be influential in other organizations and be able to help people find that best version of themselves, to create experiences in companies where all their employees could bring their whole self to work every day. And he was the biggest supporter of it. Part of it too, I would be lying if I said I was put into that role for a very specific series of reasons. One being help create value for the company. And I did that job exceptionally well. Ceridian has continued to grow and scale. And they are at a point now where they need a different leader and a different approach to HR. And so I always say I outgrew the company and the company outgrew me. And I knew that. I recognized that. And it was just wonderful that I had already kind of had a plan for what I wanted to do next. And so, when all of this kind of craziness started happening, while some people said it was the worst time for me, it was the right time, because if I could leap off this cliff with the confidence that I could do this, I knew I could weather any storm that was going to be in front of me at any point in time. And so I'm very fortunate. I've stayed very connected to David. And I still do some consulting work on the side at times for Ceridian. I still get involved with some of their events. It's a wonderful relationship, but at the same time now, I'm getting to have influence and impact on other individuals and other organizations, which is why I leap out of bed every morning, is to help other people be exceptional.
What drives you most to help those other people in that way?
This is going to sound probably a little, I don't know if cliche is the word, but it's knowing that I'm helping them show up better for their families. Mm. And some people will, like, when I was at Ceridian, I used to say, like, look, I'm not responsible for 4,000 people. I'm responsible for 4,000 families, because the reality is you spend more time awake during an average day when you were coming to work than you did when you were at home. And if you came to work and hated your job or hated the experience or whatever, then that unfortunately impacted the relationship you had with your son or daughter, with your spouse or your significant other, with your mother, with your father, with your sister, with your friends. And for me, knowing that my approach to things, or maybe a little piece of wisdom that I could share, or an idea could change that for thousands of people, well, that's really all I need. It's not about the accolades. It's not about the size of my paycheck. It's not about the title behind my name. It's truly about how I can create wonderful experiences for other people.
That is such just a lovely experience to have, to be able to do that and give that to other people. And whenever you work with these people and you're able to help them, see the best path forward for them, whether it's, helping their company evolve, maybe looking for something different, what are the reactions that you get from these people like when you can help change their life?
So there is one story, and I'm going to try to get through this without getting emotional, because every time I tell this story, it chokes me up. So there was an individual actually at Ceridian that I had met with. Oh gosh, we had email exchanges a number of times, and I finally got to meet her in person one day. And we had implemented an entirely flexible time away from work program at Ceridian. And when I say entirely flexible, like, we blew away what most companies do. We actually got to a point where we had unlimited time away from work for our non-exempt employees in the state of California. And I got told by lots of lawyers and CHROs that I talked to, you can't do this. It'll never work. We found a way to do it. And there's some things we had to do behind the scenes to make sure we abided by all the laws and regulations and what have you. But the net was we created that experience. I had a woman, when I went to our Fountain Valley office one afternoon to do a town hall, come up and give me the biggest hug I've ever been given by somebody I really didn't know. And I'm not a super huggy person. And she told me the story of how, because of this program, for the first time in her entire life, she was able to leave work early and go watch her grandson play soccer. Mm. And the impact that it had on her, like, literally, I was sobbing by the end of this conversation with her, because something that seemed so unimportant to me, given where I was in my career, I'm like, yeah, I can take time off whenever I want. Like, it wasn't important to me. But to somebody who only accrues a certain number of hours per week or per month, and we had some rigidity around how many hours you could take off at once or whatever before we blew this all up. I didn't understand the relevance and the impact something that small could have. And that was mind-blowing for me to find out, like, this woman's relationship with her family is even better now. She goes and watches her grandson play soccer on a more regular basis because of something so simple. Granted, it was difficult to implement, but something so simple that we made a decision around, which is like, look, if you select smart people to bring into your organization, get out of their way and let them go do their jobs. And a lot of companies talk about empowering employees. The only reason you empower employees is because you stripped them of their power to begin with. Select smart people, get out of their way, and give them the power to make decisions. They're adults. And that's really the way that we tried to approach things at Ceridian, and it had huge impacts. The notes that I would receive, handwritten notes in the mail. I got one from a child of a Ceridian parent saying, "Thank you for allowing my mom to be at home more." Those are the things that pull up my heartstring. And again, that makes me feel so much more meaningful and important than the Working Mother of the Year award. That's a plaque that I now have up on my wall. This will stay in my heart forever.
That is incredible. It definitely, I love the themes of your life and your career and just your whole personal mission are really, authenticity, trust, and boldness. And I think that's something that so many people can admire and learn from. Thank you so much for being here and chatting with me today, sharing your story. It was a pleasure.
Oh, it has been my honor. And again, thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
And thank you all for watching. Bye.
Bye.